Hello and welcome to Destination Draft Day. I'm your host, Michael Rockman, joined by the one and only Nick Durst. We have moved on from the conference talk. We talked about all the Power 5 conferences, talked about G5 and independence as a whole, and now we're going to do a little bit of positional focus. Hopefully this will get us all the way to the college football season, and then we'll just keep rolling from there. But today we have a very special guest, Rise and Draft, the one and only Mr. Ryan Roberts, here to talk about QBs, and we bring him in right now. Ryan, how's it going?
Everything's good, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
So, obviously, with the quarterback position, there has been plenty of love for plenty of names out there in the college football world. You know, there's talks about guys like Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, and then there's talks about, 20 other guys that are going to be first-round QBs, whether it's guys like Malik Willis from Liberty, guys like Phil Jurkovich from Boston College, and there's plenty others in between. But, really, I think that shows just how much COVID has had an impact on this whole college football and draft process as a whole. We didn't get to see a lot of clarity.
Oh, looks like Michael is frozen, Ryan. All right. So,
it does look like that.
Ryan, why don't you first tell the audience a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, sure. So going back to, I was playing high school football, played briefly at Frostburg State University where I was a linebacker. Kind of wanted to stay close to the game.
Testing. Hello?
Oh, there he is.
Sorry about that. So even guys like
Spencer
Rattler.
Something here. Ryan, finish here. Ryan was giving.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So after I played briefly at Frostburg State University, I was a linebacker in the 4-2-5. And then kind of messed up both shoulders a little bit, both torn labrum. So kind of had to step away from the game, went into coaching early on where I was a high school football and track coach for like 7 years. And I just was trying to stay near the game. So I've been writing for various sites and publications. And then I was most recently part of NFL Draft Bible, which is the main source of NFL draft content for Sports Illustrated. Since then, I've left. I'm actually starting my own project beginning next month that I haven't officially put out there yet, but still writing for Sports Illustrated, a part of Irish Breakdown. But the NFL draft-centric stuff have a pretty cool announcement coming pretty soon, so I'm pretty pumped about it.
Absolutely, and we are excited to hear about it. Sorry for the disconnect and technical difficulties there for everyone watching. But what I was saying, sorry to kind of go back to it, but just even guys at the top like Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell are far from locks to be first-round picks. And, with some of these other project QBs that are being projected with, high upside, the upside's there, but it could easily stumble into where these guys that are talked about as first-round QBs fall all the way down to day 3 or even, recommended to go back to school so that they don't end up undrafted. Ryan, with a QB class of this depth, but also this uncertainty, how crucial do you think this upcoming college football season is for many of these prospects?
I think it's paramount. You talked about obviously everything that was COVID related. We dealt with most, spring practices were shut down. Players didn't get the opportunity to get those reps that are very important, obviously, before the season. A lot of conferences are we going to play football? It gets canceled. Then they're going to come back, and there's scheduling issues, games getting canceled, rescheduled. Everybody going into last season, I felt like for the most part was pretty pumped about to see what Jaden Daniels, for instance, from Arizona State was going to kind of do, and he only got to play in 4 football games this year. So I think there was definitely some negativity surrounding not only just the navigating COVID, but also they didn't get the live game reps they needed. They didn't get the opportunity to get that added experience that we usually would go into now a junior, maybe senior season with a lot more live reps. So I think it really did limit the amount that players could, ascend during what is a crucial year, especially, going from a promising freshman year I'm going to use Daniels as the comparison here to Keaton Slovis. Like those guys barely had live reps during their sophomore year. So I think it's paramount. And just kind of my early viewing is I only have one first-round grade on quarterback. I think there's a gluttony of a lot of day 2 guys that I think could rise potentially, but it's really anybody's guessing game as far as what it's going to look like right now, even more than usual.
Yeah, and, we talk about the Pac-12. There's clearly a huge disadvantage in that regard just because of everything that was held back for those QBs with only, 6 games for most of them. The opportunity to succeed and really show that growth was not there. And, guys like Slovis, who I think really disappointed for a lot of people in terms of what expectations they had for him. Do you think that we're going to see a lot of bounce back seasons for a lot of these Pac-12 QB prospects?
Oh, yeah, I do for sure. I think that, I'm going to really hone in on Keaton Slovis for a second, right? So he was a guy that during 2019, like if you would have told me 2 years from then that he was going to be the first overall selection, I wouldn't have disagreed with you, because I think that he showed a lot as a true freshman where you could have made that path, that track towards doing that. And then obviously not only does he have COVID impacts, spring practice getting shut down, what does a fall practice situation look like? But also, you're not around your teammates until very late. But then, he also had the shoulder injury before the season. So he was a guy that did not look the same in 2020 compared to 2019. So we talked about Jaden Daniels only playing in 4 football games. I think there's some dramatic rises potentially for a lot of guys that, either had what was sophomore slumps, or if they, just were not given the necessary things that would help them to become the players that they can be. Because I don't think there's any lack of talent in the quarterback class. It's even further from finished talent than what we're usually seeing entering their redshirt junior, senior seasons.
Absolutely. And then the big talking point is a lot of these major programs are coming into this year with a young quarterback, maybe not even draft eligible. Bryce Young at Alabama, CJ Stroud at Ohio State, DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson. Really, the opportunity for success is there. Could we see a Joe Burrow type season where someone's rising up the boards but also leading their team to a really miraculous season where they're contending more so than expected with all the youth that's going on in college football at some of the major programs?
Oh, I think it's becoming a trend a little bit. 2 years ago, you're talking about Joe Burrow, and then everybody going into last year's like, oh, that rise is, that's the exception, not the rule. Like, that's not going to happen. And then we see Zach Wilson rise to being the second overall pick. So it seems like it's becoming a little bit of a trend. Will it happen 3 years in a row? It remains to be seen. But I think especially in this quarterback class where you have a lot of middle tier guys like the Matt Corrals of the world, like the Jaden Daniels, like the Malik Willises, like all these really athletic quarterbacks, talented quarterbacks that have the ability to make that rise, I think it's likely that we might have a third straight year of having a potential rise like that.
And, that's a perfect transition into our next segment. The graphic that we're going to bring up is my top 5 QBs that I think could potentially be that rising QB up draft boards. Now, I went a little bit deeper. I didn't go for a lot of these guys that are already talked about as potential first rounders. I feel like that's kind of cheating. I don't know. Last year, a lot of people were saying, oh, Kyle Trask is this riser, but he was already mocked in a lot of first round drafts. So I'm looking at guys that we're not hearing in first round mocks ever, really rarely. And so for the first one of this top 5, we got Jack Plummer out of Purdue, a young quarterback that I think maybe doesn't offer the physical upside to really be that number 1 pick. But I do think that you could look at him as someone that maybe has that Mac Jones type rise. He came in and only started 3 games for Purdue, but in that time really established himself as a consistent, steady passer. He shows phenomenal touch, great deep ball. I really like what he offered in terms of just natural arm talent. A lot of his mechanics are completely off base, slow in the hips, and I think that is going to be an issue that needs to be fixed. But it's something that really, with what he showed on the field with those issues, if he's able to get those converted into better skill set, better quickness in his hips, better tighter motion in his throwing arm and just overall form, then he could have some great rips, and I think he could fly up boards. Going on to that next QB, we got Bo Nix, someone that I think is, I'll be honest. So far, it's been not good for Bo Nix in the college football showcase. He's a fun playmaking quarterback, but the issue there is there's just so many inconsistencies in his game. He misses throws consistently. He has too many wild moments where he just overthrows his receiver and really has too many turnovers as well. But for Bo Nix, I think what has kind of put me on to the case that he could potentially rise up is Brian Harsin coming into town. Harsin has had a rich history of quick, accurate passers that have shown great intelligence. And while obviously, guys like Kellen Moore are very smart on their own, I think we could see some of those traits start to get into Nix's game. And if he is able to click, then I don't think anyone would disagree that if this guy can get that next set in the overall accuracy, the overall processing ability, the consistency side of things, then Bo Nix would be very easily at the top of the first round. But that's the thing. Can Harsin unlock that for Bo Nix? Ryan, I know you have your own thoughts on Nix. What are your thoughts on Harsin coming into town, and how crucial do you think it is for Nix as a prospect to really unlock that next level of just the overall, maybe boring things, the game manager side of stuff in terms of accuracy, consistency, and just overall progressions?
Well, I think the Auburn offense over the last couple of years has been a really tough, tough film to evaluate for quarterbacks because there's just not a lot that's put on their plate. Just a lot of bubble screens and just screens in general and easy RPO reads. And there's just like they don't ask quarterbacks to do a ton. I think that a change of scenery for a guy like Bo is going to do wonders for him. I will say that I'm not quite as high as, making that potential rise just because there's just been 2 years of very, very inconsistent tape. But I do think that from he's got a nice build. He's got a strong lower half. He's a good athlete. He's got a strong arm. There's no doubt about the tools that he has. I think a change in scenery is the best thing for him right now because we saw 2 years of there's flashes, but it's just not anything near consistency. And I think that a lot of that was due to the fact that the system that he was playing in didn't ask him to do more. It didn't work on the little fundamentals of playing quarterback. It kept it very simplistic, and it kept it very so that his talent level wasn't unlocked because at some point you need to ask a player to be challenged in order to unlock the best things about him. And I think Bo in that offense was very redundant, very simplistic, and I think that having a coach like Brian Harsin coming in could do a lot of good for a guy like Bo Nix.
Yeah, and obviously a huge compliment for Bo Nix will be Tank Bigsby in that backfield. But another issue, perhaps, is losing wide receivers Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz to the NFL. Do you think that he is going to have issues with this young wide receiver staff, or do you think maybe it'll help him kind of take that leadership role of the offense?
I think he's no matter how you feel about Bo Nix, he's coming into his third year as a starting quarterback. And there's a leadership quality that comes to every quarterback position just in general. The minute that a quarterback, and this is sometimes a little counterproductive at times because sometimes quarterbacks will go in as true freshmen starting and the lights might be a little too bright for them. But I think that a guy that's been there, done that, has command over not the offense because he's still learning a lot of things, obviously, with Coach Harsin coming in, but just the fact of he knows how to command the huddle. He knows the guys around him. He has been around this program. He's been in the facilities consistently. He's been in the weight room. He knows the ins and outs of what it is to be an Auburn quarterback. It's just the fact of now meshing that with what the coach staff's bringing in. But I think that I don't think that he's going to go in gun shy any day because I think he's comfortable in his own skin, in the facilities, on the playing field. And I think going into his third year as a starting quarterback is going to allow him to have that comfort while also learning a new system.
Definitely agree with you there. And our third QB on this list, Davis Brin, the third string quarterback out of Tulsa last year, started just 1 or 2 quarters really for Tulsa last year, a game against Tulane where he really came in and showed some great tools. He has a rocket of an arm, has some stiffness. I think there's some issues in terms of overall consistency. We saw that in just 2 quarters. There were some moments, but the overall arm talent is absolutely there. He showed some great escapability. I think he has some moments that really, if he can be that full-time starting QB for Tulsa, if he can continue to develop his arm in terms of accuracy, just getting that touch, he put some rockets out there. Whether it was just post routes, cutting or hitch routes, or whether it was some of the deep balls that were really sent out to the sideline, it was absolutely miraculous to see a huge comeback. He showed some great clutch ability. Now, obviously, you don't want to just throw someone up after 2 quarters of play. But from what we saw from Davis Brin, he absolutely has some promise. And if he can really just continue to unlock that, then we could be talking about this guy as someone that really is in draft conversations and draft circles alike. For number 4, we got Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Chip Kelly has really started to build a little bit of something in UCLA. I'm a fan of what I saw last year. Obviously, the record sort of trailed off at the end of it, but I think UCLA has a lot of promise, returning a lot of their offensive line. They have some impressive running backs in that backfield. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, as a prospect, has the arm talent and mobility. The issue is, can he really refine his game and really settle down a little bit? A lot of times he will force plays, and it's just going to be a matter of trying to fix that up. Now, that doesn't mean that just, if he's able to calm down, he's just going to be the top QB. There's still issues in terms of just overall touch, accuracy, just small things like that. But those small things go a long way in terms of overall success out of the quarterback position. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson is someone who drastically needs that. But in terms of playmaking ability, there are not many across college football who can do what DTR can do. The issue is, can DTR do that on a consistent basis? Ryan, obviously, Chip Kelly came in with a world of expectations in UCLA. Do you have any expectations for the UCLA Bruins in this year and what is a little bit of an open opportunity in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I actually kind of like what they're doing offensively. I don't know defensive side of the ball if I'm quite as high on what the Chip Kelly era has been bringing, but I really do like a couple players on that offense. The tight end Dulcich and Sean Ryan at left tackle is one of my favorite offensive line prospects in the entire 2022 draft so far. For DTR, he kind of is in the same breath as Malik Willis for me. I do prefer Malik a little bit to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but they're the same in the sense of they make a lot of difficult things look relatively easy sometimes. They have that natural ability in and outside the pocket with their athleticism, strong arms. They can throw on the run. They have a lot of great things that make what a lot of players, wish they could make. Some plays that players just dream of making, and they add the athleticism and the overall talent to do so. The inconsistencies come from DTR especially. I mean, he was a guy that sat behind Tate Martell for a couple years, and he didn't start at quarterback, full time until his senior year of high school. So he's been a guy that hasn't played quarterback position that long in general. And I think that a lot of what he and Malik Willis struggle with is guys that haven't played a ton. Sometimes you make what are relatively easy throws very difficult. And I think that is something that needs to be remedied. And that is just footwork stuff, honestly. I think that a lot of times Dorian Thompson-Robinson's lead foot isn't great. I think his hips fly open, which affects his overall accuracy and affects, just the ball placement that he has. And, I mean, you'll see him sail easy 5-yard outs and some difficult throws, then he'll make. And he's a guy that keeps pulling you back in. But until he makes the easy things easy, I think that it's a little bit of a hard sell. But, I mean, from a talent perspective, could he be a guy that rises? Absolutely. I mean, especially going into, his third year in Coach Kelly's system, I think that there is a good opportunity with a couple nice weapons, with a underrated offensive line. As I mentioned Sean Ryan, but they got Anderson at right tackle, who's been a good football player for UCLA as well. So there's some guys protection-wise that are coming back. There's a couple weapons. I think that he is going to have an opportunity. Britton Brown at running back. I think there's good things on the horizon for UCLA football. It's all going to really kind of go onto the shoulders eventually of, can Dorian Thompson-Robinson become what people thought he could be coming out of Bishop Gorman?
Absolutely. And, for all those people that watched the Pac-12 episode, as you know, I was going out on a limb there, predicted UCLA to take the Pac-12. With that success, could easily come some attention for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. For our last QB on this QB Risers list, we're going with Devin Leary, someone that's probably gotten a little bit more attention in terms of just overall draft stock from what I've seen compared to the other four, but still someone that I think could potentially find himself rising up boards. Played just 4 games last season, suffered a broken ankle due to an injury from Lummy Young tackling him, but still Devin Leary showed plenty, and I think there's plenty of promise there for the QB. A really sort of consistent passer. I think he offers nice touch at all levels of the field. I don't know if he's going to offer the same amount of just downfield passing ability. He shows plenty of velocity on outside throws, but going downfield, he still needs to be a more consistent passer. Kind of reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick if you're looking for a sort of comparison. I think there's plenty of opportunity there at North Carolina State with some of the weapons that they have. And I think really Devin Leary with a full season of starting could absolutely ascend up boards. I think this is someone that I think has the size, the arm, and just the overall mobility to kind of get around and make plays. He sets himself up well. And from what I did in my overall evaluation of him, I thought that he was someone that really showed very nice poise in the pocket. And I think that's something that we saw with guys like Joe Burrow, was just being able to stay calm in the face of adversity, in the face of pressure, and make plays. That's absolutely huge. And Devin Leary does it well.
I really like.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I really like the Devin Leary kind of just mentioned real quick because he was a guy. I'm a New Jersey guy. He was from Timber Creek originally here in New Jersey, and he was I mean, arguably the greatest high school quarterback in New Jersey history. And we saw him pressed in 2019 into playing a ton when he wasn't ready. And he still had some flashes, but like when you look at the completion percentage and just yards per attempt, like he just wasn't fully ready to take the reins for NC State. But then we saw in 2020 major improvements in the game before he went down injured. But I think I would reiterate a couple things you said was the fact of I think that down the field, he still needs to kind of master change of arm speeds and angles and just, what platform to throw certain balls. But there are some throws down the field outside the numbers, especially because, they have big wide receivers at NC State. That's what they kind of had over recent years with Kelvin Harmon and now Amizi out there. Being able to throw outside the numbers is a big part of that offense. And they carry Angelini, who was a big tight end, but they just don't have a bunch of separators. But I think coming back now with Ekwonu and the center, who's a draftable player, and having Amizi back, and having Zonovan Knight, the running back, I think Devin Leary, if he has a full season, could potentially be one of those risers because I do think that he was showing massive improvements from 2019 to 2020. It's now just about a full year and a full amount of reps for him.
Absolutely. And, going with Devin Leary here, it's a perfect transition into the top 10 QBs for the preseason ranks. Number 10, Devin Leary. We talked about it a little bit. There's some issues in terms of just getting better as a downfield passer, but Devin Leary has shown plenty of promise in terms of this QB class. We talked about it at the beginning of the episode. There's about 20 guys that could easily be in a top 10, and I don't think anyone would really bat an eye at it. For me, Devin Leary fits in at this 10 spot, and, some of these guys I think me and Ryan are even going to be very separated on in terms of opinion, but there's definitely going to be some similarities as well. Devin Leary here at number 10, though, I think is someone that could very easily find himself in that second or third round range with a strong season. I think he offers plenty of upside and plenty of ability as a passer. Some of those QBs that are kind of hyped up as that Kenny Pickett, Phil Dracovic, he kind of fits in that range with the ability to kind of make those plays and really be a safe QB option for a lot of these teams. Really, I think Devin Leary, though, is one of my favorite of the batch. And now at number 9, Graham Mertz out of Wisconsin. I think this is someone that really kind of has gotten the short end of the stick in terms of situation. Wisconsin's offense wasn't the best, but there were plenty of flashes from Mertz overall as a player. Really, I kind of wish that he was somewhere else. And I hate to say that because I love seeing him commit to Wisconsin, seeing Wisconsin get this opportunity at a QB, which for many years was talked about as, if they get a quarterback, this team could be a contender. Maybe that happens this year, and I'd love to see it. But really, for Graham Mertz, there's just a lot of inconsistencies on his tape, and I think a lot of it comes down to just the lack of weapons from Wisconsin last year. I like his arm talent. I think he's a physical player. He takes sacks, he takes contact well without going down. I think he needs to work on his overall escapability. Could do a little bit better handling pressure. I think when he gets off balance, he has some really wild throws. But really, what I saw from him as a prospect is something that you like to see out of the young QB, especially in a first year starting. And with the situation that was COVID-19 impacting college football as much as it did, what I saw in terms of flash from Mertz has me sold enough to have him in my top 10.
Yeah,
at number 8. Go ahead.
He was off to a tremendous start. I mean, one of the most impressive debuts I've ever seen.
Absolutely. And at number 8, I know Ryan's going to wince at this one. He has him a lot higher. I have Carson Strong. I love his ability to throw downfield. He has a rocket of an arm, an absolute cannon. If you are looking for someone that can throw the ball with ease anywhere on the field, you're looking for Carson Strong, and that's definitely something that a lot of people are going to be sold on. For me, though, I have issues with his overall mobility. I didn't love what I saw out of just overall pocket presence and stuff like that. I think he's going to be similar to a Jacob Eason type. And, Ryan, I'm going to let you tell me why I'm wrong here. But for me, he comes in at number 8. Ryan, let's get your evaluation of him.
I mean, I'm a huge Carson Strong fan. I mean, there's several layers to why I am such a big fan. I mean, first of all, I am a huge believer in progression over your career. So we saw 2019, Carson Strong as a redshirt freshman, had some nice flashes, but it was very kind of up and down first year with Nevada, and he was kind of, back and forth between, is he the starter? I know they had Malik Henry in there at one point too, and a couple other quarterbacks playing. But we really saw him take off in year 2 under coach Matt Mummy, who is the son of Hal Mummy, who is the godfather of the air raid system, and really took off under Jay Norvell and with the Romeo Dubs of the world and the Cole Turner at tight end, and they got Aaron Frost at right tackle, who's an NFLer. I really loved the progression that I saw just from him, and from a physical standpoint, like you kind of mentioned it, big armed guy, kind of gave him a little comparison to Carson Palmer, who I think, he's your traditional pocket quarterback who has a live arm, can touch every area of the field, 3-level threat as a passer. But I think that the thing that I disagree with slightly is the fact of, is he a running quarterback? Absolutely not. He's not a guy that, is going to, he might move the chains once or twice a game. He's not a guy that's going to break the pocket a ton, but I really do think that I saw a ton of ability within the pocket, sliding, stepping up. I think that he has some pocket awareness to him that's still developing, but I think that there is untapped potential there. And I think he's actually a better athlete than some people do give him credit for. If you go back to his high school career, he was a big-time high school basketball player, and I think that he is a guy that could unlock his potential as a quarterback outside of structure more. He's just a guy that, just has won consistently in the pocket during his career, and he did a great job of it this past year. And then I think that the other thing that is the hidden part of the evaluation and why it's tough for, on the media side, is that the quarterback evaluation on film, we're watching physically, but then it's the mental side of the game. And I think that you see it on film, IDing mics, setting protections, just command of the offense. I think Carson Strong had more on his plate than almost any quarterback in the 2022 class as far as the ability to change things at the line and to set protections. So I'm really buying into the mental side of the game combined with the obviously the arm talent that he has. And I'm hoping that he is able to unlock his athleticism a little more, because I think he's a better athlete than just your traditional standard statue in the pocket. But I just don't think that has how he is won in the past. So I'm excited to see him in another year, on a third year now in the system, see his progression, because I think that he is a guy that will contend for one of the first 2 or 3 quarterbacks when all is said and done.
Yeah, and I'm willing to admit full transparency to everyone. While I've watched Carson Strong, and I feel like I've watched plenty, I haven't done my deep dive report on him yet. So maybe, with a full evaluation, I do change my mind on it. But right now, from where I'm at, that is where I have him. At number 7, another guy that I think has a rocket of an arm, but it's just about finding a way to really get this refinement in his game. But someone that's been mocked in plenty of first-round mocks over the past 2 classes, Desmond Ridder. And I think this is someone that is going to have a lot of Josh Allen in his sort of treatment. And that's not saying he's a Josh Allen comparison. I just think there's going to be a lot of similarities to how a lot of people view Josh Allen, where Desmond Ridder has a lot of inconsistencies in his game. He has a lot of issues in terms of sporadic accuracy, a lot of issues in terms of just overall play, really. But if he can continue to grow in terms of better touch on his passes, better ability to really, see all levels of the field, I think his vision is something that holds him back plenty. A lot of missed check down opportunities that I think held back Cincinnati a little bit. If Ridder can really unlock that, and I think a lot of coaches and a lot of front offices are going to believe that they absolutely can, then Ridder is going to be a first-round pick. While I am not as high on him, and I know a lot of people that I talk to about the draft are super low on him, even lower than I am, I do think Ridder has plenty of the tools, plenty of the mobility, and plenty of the size that is going to entice plenty of front offices to be willing to gamble on him. Ryan, Ridder is someone that I think has been talked about as a potential first rounder both last year and now this year. What are your thoughts on Ridder as a QB prospect, and really what does he need to do to really establish himself and be a secure first round pick?
Well, he's polarizing. I know there's a lot of varying opinions on a guy like Desmond Ridder, who is now coming into his 4th year as a starter for Cincinnati. My thoughts are kind of the same as it has been during the just overall scope of his career. When he was a freshman, I was convinced that this guy was going to be the next big thing, because he showed a lot of flashes. I mean, it's easy to see the unteachables, the 6'3", 6'4", 220-pound frame, athletic, strong arm. Like, there's not, you don't have to be a good scout or have a good eye to see those unteachables that he has. But going into 2019, I felt like he had regression. I feel like he was just kind of the same guy. He didn't have any progression to any degree. And I was excited about it this summer, early in the summer, because I was, when you just kind of just look at what he was able to accomplish in 2020, a part of what was a historical season for Cincinnati football, I was assuming that there was going to be this huge boy and not only in production, but just overall play. And I just didn't get it, to be honest. I think that there is some very troubling inaccuracy to his game. And I think that it's something that's just kind of been consistent over the last 3 years. And I think that there's still some hope for him, because I do think that there are, again, those unteachables. But for me, he reminds me a lot of what Kellen Mond was last year out of Texas A&M. I think stylistically they're kind of similar. They both have all the perceived talent in the world. Maybe Ritter might even be a little more talented just, from a overall arm strength and athleticism perspective. But until I start to see a little more progression, it's just hard for me to buy in a little bit with him, because I just feel like he's just kind of been the same guy. Because that was the thing with Kellen Mond. It was just like for 3 years, and he was a 4-year starter, but for 3 years, he was just the same guy, consistently. So I'm hoping that Ritter takes a big step. I know that I have a friend on Twitter, Corey Kinnan, who kind of charted a lot of the quarterback accuracy stuff, and Desmond Ritter was like appallingly low as far as like on target accuracy. So a lot of things to work on. I think that there is a lot of consistency. I think he has very long limbs, which set up quickness and ability to get the football out of his hand, a little bit of elongated release. Like I think there's just some things that don't help the accuracy issues. But right now, I just think that he's a little bit too much of a, just a work in progress for me to buy into right now. But he certainly has the athletic skill set to rise.
Absolutely. And at number 5, another G5 guy, Grayson McCall, someone that I think has really shown plenty of ability to move around the field. A comparison, if you're looking for someone, and, I don't think this is one-for-one type of comparison, but I think a similar play style would be Jalen Hurts, the QB for Philadelphia. Obviously, there's been some varied opinions on what he can do for the NFL, but Grayson McCall, I think, has similar ability in terms of solid downfield passer, but there's some issues in terms of just overall anticipation as a passer. Nice mobility. I think Hurts is the better athlete, obviously, but McCall can run around as well. Coastal Carolina put together a historic season, and McCall was a huge part of that. Javon Haley was a great receiver as well, and McCall gets a lot of those weapons back. I think the running back room is going to continue to improve, or just produce, And, McCall for me is someone that I'm not necessarily as high on, but I think the overall consistency in his play, the overall ability to push the ball downfield while doing it at a high rate of success, keeping the ball clean in terms of just avoiding turnovers, was really a major selling point for me. I think this is someone that, while I don't see the overall progression up boards, I don't think he's going to be someone that rises up as much. I do think that he's going to stay safely in this kind of middle tier of the class, and I think he's someone that, if he does declare, will be looked at as a third-round talent that could potentially fight for a starting job someday in his NFL career. Ryan, obviously, Grayson McCall, probably already an established legend for Coastal Carolina going forward, but in terms of what he can do as an NFL prospect, what would you like to see from him as a quarterback?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to actually interview a lot of Coastal Carolina guys this offseason, Grayson being one of them. I will say that the coolness and the calmness on the field, you get the same kind of vibe off the field. I think that he loves the game. I think that he is a gamer. I think, which is a very big cliche, obviously, in the scouting world, but I think that he truly is kind of the person he is, really sells you to what type of player he is, because I think that he just has absolute command of the Coastal Carolina offense. Like you kind of highlighted, I think he's a plus athlete. I think he moves around well. For anybody that's seen that Coastal offense, they have a lot of option, kind of movement out of, what it looks like a single wing at times, which is, not a heavily translatable offense to the NFL. But I do think that he, runs the offense to a T, despite only being a redshirt freshman last year. He has the frame to add weight at only about 200 pounds right now, at right around 6'3". But I think that he has the calmness. I think that he has the command. I think that he's a good athlete. I think that he's accurate. My biggest question for him is I don't know how strong his arm is. I've seen the ball flutter a little bit outside the numbers. I think that it's on par arm strength. I think it's salvageable. I think that he can play at the next level. I just think that there are some limitations to the arm. So I do think that this is the correct range for him, though. Anywhere between 5 and 7, I think, is a good spot for a guy like Grayson McCall, because I think he has a relatively high floor, to at least being a very substantial backup quarterback, maybe being a spot starter, maybe developing into a full-time starter down the line. And I think that there is a substantial floor for that. I'm just curious to see if a year of maturation and physical development, how much that adds to the juice in the arm. Because right now I just see more of a short to intermediate thrower without the ability to really push vertically a ton.
I definitely can agree with you on that. And at number 5, a little bit of a hot take for you. Jack Plummer, we talked about him in the sleeper section. I think this is someone that could very well rise up boards. And, there's some issues. I think we talked about with his overall form with technique, both in his lower body and upper body, it needs improvement. But what I saw from him as a touch passer, what I saw from him with his overall just ability to get the ball out and right into the basket, I think he processes the field well, gets into it very well. He's a layered thrower, I think. And really, one of the best things about him is his size, 6'5", 220 pounds. He takes hits well, and he really can move around the field decently. He's referred to as the mobile QB of the two between him and O'Connell. I know Plummer was kind of battling for a QB job last year. I think he's definitely in line to be the full-time starter now. But I don't see the mobility as much, even though the broadcasters were saying that. I think that's something that will need to be kind of overcome. That's why I kind of have him in that 5 range. And I don't think he's someone that's going to fly up boards as much. I think he's going to sit in that kind of 5 to 10 range. And maybe I'll just be completely off. I know there's a lot of people who don't even have Plummer on their radar right now. But from what I saw from him in the limited action that he was able to really showcase, he was just a dominant QB with great touch, great consistency in his play. And really, I keep making comparisons. I know, Ryan, you're not the biggest fan of comparisons, but if you're looking for someone that's kind of a similar play style, I kind of compared him to Nick Foles. I think there's a little bit of similarities in their game. Maybe not the most athletic QBs, but still able to pick up some yards. Nice arm, maybe not the most game-changing arm, but still consistency in their touch and ability to win both ways to where they can be a consistent QB and potential starter down the line. And at number 4, we got Malik Willis out of Liberty, a QB that really has been highly touted entering this offseason, someone that really possesses all the athleticism in the world, was the backup to Bo Nix, who we talked about in that sleeper section, transferred to Liberty with Hugh Freeze, and now has really set the college football world on fire. Ryan talked about it a little bit earlier. He has ways to make things look easy that shouldn't look easy at all for many QBs, and Malik Willis does it with just ease. And while the mobility is definitely something to talk about, I think the passing ability is something that needs to be talked about as well. While there is plenty of refinement needed in his game, he offers a great arm and just overall talent to push the ball both downfield and in the short game. If he can just continue to really kind of bring it all in, bring it together, and make it a consistent product, then Malik Willis could be talked about as one of the top prospects in this class fairly easily. And, I'm going to let Ryan take it away here, but Liberty should be in for another very successful season.
Yeah, I think we see him pretty similarly. I think he is quarterback 6 on my preseason list so far, and he's a guy that, I have between quarterback 4 to 8, I have guys that are relatively in a pretty similar range. There's only a couple points that really separate guys in that range, but I think that Malik Willis, like you said, Auburn transfer, had to wait his turn, transfers to Liberty, had to sit out 2019 as a transfer to Liberty. I think that athleticism is fantastic. He's 6 foot, 218 pounds, verified. He, has, a very thick lower half. He's a strong runner. He's explosive. But his arm strength is on par with anybody in this class. I would say that there were probably – the Spencer Rattler, Carson Strong, and Malik Willis are probably that first tier of who has the strongest arms, in my opinion, in this class. And Malik does some things outside of structure, both on the run and just as an athlete in general, that are breathtaking. They are things that are easy to sell. It's just, for me right now, it's the next step. It's the refinement. It's the consistency. It's making easy things easy. That is the next step for Malik Willis. I had him in my first way too early mock draft because people love that stuff for some reason. I had him going in the late first round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because I thought it would just be hysterical to see Tom Brady and Malik Wilson in the same practice uniform, to be honest. And I would love to see just the adverse of their styles. And I think that he is a really high upside quarterback. Unfortunately, he's a guy that, we talked about like a Grayson McCall having a substantial floor. Malik Willis is one of those guys that as high as the floor is, as high as the ceiling is as low as the floor is. This is a guy that I don't see a substantial floor. Like this guy is going to be a star at the next level, or he's going to be a guy that's going to have a hard time kind of sticking long term. So I think there's a lot to like about Malik Willis. He could very well be a top 3 quarterback with all said and done. But right now I have him at quarterback 6 because there's just a little bit of some inconsistencies to work out. He's in that same tier for me as the Jaden Daniels and the Matt Corrals and those types of guys that the athletic upside is easy to see. You don't have to sell anybody on the unteachables. It's just about the consistency aspects for them.
Absolutely. And the QB3, maybe a little bit of a surprise, Sam Howell out of North Carolina, a very consistent QB, and I'm a fan. I don't want this number 3 ranking to come off as, me not being an enjoyer of Howell. I think the overall ability to push the ball as a passer, I think he shows great deep accuracy. He has quick hips. Talked about it on the show a little bit earlier during the ACC episode. One of the best hips as a passer in this class, in my opinion. I think he needs to maybe be a little bit more improved in terms of just his throw speeds. I think a lot of his throw speeds can be a little bit inconsistent. I think there's some issues in terms of throwing off platform. Getting his shoulders more consistently aligned perfectly is going to be huge for him as well. But Sam Howell is someone that I think is going to be a consistent starter at the NFL level when his time comes, whether he declares this year or sometime down the road. I think he is someone that I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm going to keep doing it, I guess, but someone that I think a comparison for him, a lot of people want to say Baker Mayfield. I see kind of Dak Prescott in his game. While I think Dak is a little bit better in terms of mobility, I think both have a lot of similarities in their game. Maybe not the most dominant arm, but I think still a consistent way to win, a smart QB that really keeps the ball safe. And for Sam Howell, he is really the savior of UNC. You can give credit to Mac Brown. Obviously, he's done a phenomenal job. But Sam Howell has been the face of the turnaround at North Carolina. I think that's huge for a guy like him and just for a prospect overall. Sam Howell now this year at North Carolina in what will likely be his final year with new weapons has plenty of opportunity to really staple down just how good he has been as a college football quarterback. And for me, I think he's going to really confirm all doubts that he is a solid QB and should be here in the first round talk. Ryan, Sam Howell is someone that has been highly touted even as a true freshman, and now the time has finally come where he's draft eligible. Do you think that he is going to, continue to match expectations like he has so far?
I think it's going to be tough. As far as, do I think he's going to have a good season? I absolutely do because he's done fantastic over the first 2. But there's a lot going against him this year. He lost De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome and Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. He lost his 4 top weapons, and he has Bo Corrales coming back, who's a solid wide receiver, kind of coming off an injury. I know he has Ty Chandler transferring in from Tennessee. So there's a couple guys, but that's a lot of offensive firepower for one offseason for turnover. I think that having a full offseason in general, kind of making our way back from the pandemic is a good thing to have for a guy like Sam Howell. I would just say if he matches what he's done the first 2 years, and I think that really cements him as far as what the NFL does think about him and what the NFL should think about him, because obviously he did the best with what is a lot of turnover and a lot of bad situations. I don't think his offensive line's great. I think he's breaking in a lot of new weapons. So I think it's a huge year for Sam Howell. I don't think the expectations should be quite to what he did the first 2 years, but I think that the expectations should still be high for what he's done for that North Carolina program.
Absolutely. Definitely going to have to really carry the load for this North Carolina team. But if he does so, I think a lot of people will be quite impressed. At QB2, we got Matt Corral, someone that Ryan's name dropped a few times, but obviously plenty of talent here. For me, I'm a huge fan of his overall ability with his arm talent. I think he offers plenty of athleticism. Some questions about his release. I think he can go a little bit low, but the arm angle is something that is going to win people over with Matt Corral. And I think the turnovers are obviously what everyone's going to point to first. 2 games where he threw 12 interceptions, I believe, or 11 of them in 2 games. And, that can't happen. That's just terrible. But I do think that Corral showed plenty in terms of just overall consistency in his game-to-game throwing. Yes, those 2 games are going to be watched like a hawk. And if he has any in this upcoming season, there's going to be a lot of people that are just completely sold out on not being in on him anymore. But for me, I think Matt Corral is going to be able to shake that a little bit. Another year with Lane Kiffin, I think Ole Miss is going to be having a lot of nice weapons. Jerry and Ely in the backfield. I think Braylon Sanders is a very talented wide receiver at the college football level that should be able to kind of fill that void of Elijah Moore. Can Matt Corral really be that leader for Ole Miss? I think is going to be a huge question for him and just overall presentation as a prospect. But I'm sold on him, and I think really he's closer to 1 than he is to 3 for me.
And I've heard a lot of people that I respect also talk about Jonathan Mingo, their wide receiver. So he might be another guy to keep an eye on. I know they have a couple offensive linemen like Ben Brown and Nick Breaker who are coming back, or Broker who are coming back. So he's got some firepower coming back. Matt Corral is a guy that makes me very nervous, to be very honest with you, because I agree that I think his upside is very high. If you had to ask me who are the guys that are going to make that dramatic rise, he would be right near the top, because I think that from an athleticism and from a just arm talent perspective, there is a lot to like. I think he's one of the more physically gifted quarterbacks in the entire class. But like you said, I mean, some guys have the clunkers from time to time where, they threw 4 interceptions in a game. They threw 5, whatever it might be. 2 separate games with 5+ interceptions, 6 and 5, 6 against Arkansas, 5 against LSU. That is tough pill to swallow, especially because the other games combined, you only threw 3. So it wasn't like it was a consistent issue all the way through the season, but in 2 games, you threw 11 interceptions, and that is a hard thing to, kind of just accept for a little bit, because at some point it's got to be a risk versus reward. And I think he's a guy that is so physically gifted that he does have some of that. It's one of my favorite terminologies I've heard is arm arrogance, right? Like he thinks that he can make every throw, which on the college level for the most part, he can. But I really do want to see him, just be a lot more understanding of where the football needs to go on a snap-to-snap basis, because I think if he cleans up the game, there again is a lot to like about him. There's just it's just there is. I mean, those are 2 big blemishes of games. It's not like he threw a 2 interception game, a 3 interception game. It's 6 in 1 football games, a lot. So seeing Matt Corral in another year with Coach Kiffin, obviously Coach Kiffin is one of the best offensive minds in the college game. So I expect a big rise for Matt Corral. This is higher than I have him, because I think that he, again, is in that 5 to 7 range for me. I think he's in that bucket with some of those more talented passers. But I will say that the NFL, just looking at the spring grades that came back from National and Blesto, NFL does value him very highly. I've seen some for 1st to 2nd round grades on him already. So I do think that he is a guy that is going to be valued that high. For me personally, just to get more comfortable, I just need to see a better decision maker from a game to game and from a snap to snap kind of sample size.
Absolutely. And, the questions here for all these QBs are going to be far and wide, and a lot of them, are going to meet the calls and really establish themselves as solidified prospects for this class. And there's going to be a lot of people that disappoint and fall off in terms of the overall draft perspective. And maybe that results in some day 3 gems when the time comes, or maybe it results in, a lot of people just not being that NFL QB that a lot of people were hoping for. And, just as much as Matt Corral has those issues, we could talk about that for all 1 through 10. And, we talked about that at the beginning. All of these guys are definitely going to have their question marks. And if they can't really meet those questions, then, we could see some drastic falls from glory. And we have oh, never mind. Sorry, I thought we had a comment, but it was just someone trying to get us to be famous. We're already famous here. Come on. Number 1, though, the easy chalkboard consensus answer, Spencer Rattler. I'm sorry to be boring, but, I really like what I saw from him. Starting out the season, it seemed as though Spencer Rattler may have been a disappointment for the overall Oklahoma line of history at the QB position, but he has shown a lot of growth. That second half of the season for him was very impressive. Some great, just snap ability with his ball. I think he has some of the best arm talent in this class. I think he has great mobility working with Lincoln Riley. I think he's going to continue to progress as a passer. For Oklahoma, I think this is a huge opportunity of a year just to really potentially go in there and contend for a championship. I think the ceiling is that high. The offense clearly has the talent. The defense has some great front seven pieces. If that secondary can really kind of come together and really answer those questions, then Oklahoma could be very much not just that playoff team that kind of gets there and then loses first round. They could be a contender if things work out right, if the dominoes fall correctly, and Rattler is going to be the face of that. Obviously Rattler still has consistency issues. Do you see a certain floor for Rattler, or do you think he's someone that, is similar to Willis, where while he has a tremendous ceiling, that floor is still very far down as well?
Well, I agree completely with what you were saying just about the Oklahoma outlook for the season. I mean, you're talking about guys from Marvin Mims to Theo Weiss to Tennessee transfer Eric Gray, Kennedy Brooks, a couple offensive guards that are NFL prospects, Wanye Morris coming over from Tennessee as well. The best defense Oklahoma's probably had in, I couldn't even tell you, Isaiah Thomas and Perrion Winfrey and all these dudes. It's an exceptionally talented team. Nick Benito. I think that the floor, if we're talking about, I think the floor is substantially higher for a guy like Spencer Rattler, just because I think that from a just arm talent perspective, and that's not just arm strength, that is the ability to layer the football, to throw from different arm angles, to do the little things that maybe the casual fan doesn't really look, but just kind of the nuances of the game. I think that he has that skill set easy to see. I think that he can do things off script, and I think that he just has a solid floor because I think that accuracy-wise, he's very good. I don't think that accuracy is an issue at all. I think that there are some times where he is, again, a little arrogant with his arm, and he thinks that he can make every single throw when there's some that he has no business even attempting at times. So I think I think one other thing to consider is the fact of, we saw the string of quarterbacks with Lincoln Riley, the Baker Mayfields, the Kyler Murrays, the Jalen Hurts, all those guys were transfer quarterbacks who came to the team at an older age. Spencer Rattler's the first guy that is now going to start a line of developed quarterbacks from a freshman season for Lincoln Riley. And I think that really is going to see a big jump in year two. I think Rattler is definitely the consensus guy for most people. Like if you are predicting who would end up as quarterback one, I think the floor is I think he's going to be a top 10 to 15 pick because I just think the arm talent and just the overall physical profile is that of a top 10, top to 15 quarterback. Is there some things to clean up? Absolutely. Are there some times where he needs to reel it in a little bit and understand that, it's not every play has to be a home run? Absolutely. But I do think that the floor is definitely there for him to potentially be a top 10 to 15 pick. And I think the ceiling is that he might be the first pick off the board.
Yeah, I think right now, if I had to gamble on anyone to be the first pick, it would absolutely be Spencer Rattler. But with this top 10, there's some notable snubs that I think we should still talk about because there's much more than 10. We talked about it. There's guys all over the class that could be getting plenty of love. At number 11 for me would probably be Keaton Slovis. Ryan, I know you're a lot higher on him. Why don't you give the fans a little bit of an evaluation from your perspective on what Slovis can offer as an NFL prospect?
Yeah, and I don't blame anybody for being a little lower on him because he was a guy that I talked about a little bit. 2019 film was fantastic as a true freshman, but the 2020 was not. And we're dealing with a smaller sample size. We're dealing with a lot of inconsistencies, but there was also, for the context of the situation, he's dealing with COVID. He's dealing with a shortened season. He's dealing with hey, at one point we didn't think the Pac-12 was even going to have a season. And it was a quick turnaround to even have and a semblance of the season for USC. And then he has the shoulder injury before the season. So I think that most people would say there's a happy median, right? There's a freshman season, then there's a sophomore season, and probably who he realistically is somewhere in between. And that could be very possible. But for me, I really did buy into the 2019 film. I think that there was a lot that happens with that shoulder injury because I did not see, as a true freshman at only 17 and 18 years old, I did not see a lack of arm strength like it looked like at times in 2020. I saw juice to the arm. 2020 told a different story. And again, most recent film. So anybody thinks differently, you're entitled to your opinion, and I will respect that. but I am holding out hope, and I think that's what summer scouting really is for, is projecting forward. I am under the opinion that if Keaton Slovis does return and is healthy and returns to the 2019 form, that he can contend to be one of the top 3 to 4 quarterbacks on the board. Because I think from a technical perspective, I like a lot of what I see. I think that he has a command to the game. I think that there is a very solid floor to get it, to get aligned with a guy like Keaton Slovis. The question is, what is the upside coming back from an injury, coming back from a shortened season? Is he the guy we saw in 2019, or is the guy we saw in 2020 what we're going to see from here on out?
Absolutely. And, 2019 was a phenomenal season for him. Plenty of upside there. There are other prospects as well. Phil Dracovic, Kenny Pickett, guys that I talked about, De'Aaron King, Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels. Nick Durst loves Jaden Daniels. So someone that I want
to ask Ryan about a guy who is continually snubbed from Michael's snubbed list. This guy was very highly ranked. Today was actually named to the Maxwell Award watch list, and that's going to be the potential starting quarterback for Florida State, and that is Mackenzie Milton, who once was trending in the right direction. A horrible injury, gruesome. Let's hope he can even get in the field. But Ryan, if he has a solid season here, any chances we could see him in the NFL, even as an undrafted free agent?
Yeah, I could definitely see like the undrafted free agent type of range. I think that it is an awesome story just that he's playing football again after that horrific injury. I mean, that was one of the most gruesome things I had ever seen. And before that, I think he had won like 23 out of the last 24 games for UCF. So obviously he had been a very consistent and had been it's been a substantial career for a guy like a Mackenzie Milton. And he had brought UCF to a duration of prominence, to say the least. I think that from an NFL evaluation, though, I am a little less optimistic about what he can do outside of what he can do in 2021 potentially, because I just think that, he's listed at 5'11". I'm going to guess he's closer to 5'10", 5'10" and some change. He's a small quarterback who I think has some good improv skills, but again, we haven't seen him back on the field, outside of a spring game and some practice highlights, since the gruesome injury. So, let's see what type of improviser is he still. And I don't think he has a ton of juice to his arm. I think, though, that a team is going to, kick the tires on a guy like him because he's proven to be a winner at the college level. And if he comes back and he has just a solid season for Florida State, I think that a team's going to at least give him a look. I just don't think that he has the physical profile to maybe be a guy that a team really invests in on a long-term outlook, if that makes sense.
And, we got to wrap this up quickly, but I just want to give a few more shout-outs. Connor Bazelak and Emery Jones are guys that I am looking forward to in this upcoming season. I think there's potential there. Maybe not as high on JT Daniels, but he's another guy that's gotten a lot of love around the draft sphere in terms of prospect attention. But
give some love to Noah Vedral. Noah
Vedral, of course. We got to respect Rutgers here. And, Aiden Ani as well. North Texas, baby. Let's go. But we want to thank Ryan so much for coming on, talking quarterbacks today. Ryan, go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you if they want to see some more draft takes or NFL takes or anything takes from you.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I really appreciate you guys for first and foremost for having me on again. You can follow me out there at Rise N Draft, the letter N Draft. If you want NFL draft content, just NFL college football content, and I also specialize in Notre Dame content, a part of the IrishBreakdown.com, which is the main source of Notre Dame content for Sports Illustrated. So, and Notre Dame, college football, NFL, specifically NFL draft, come follow me, and hopefully you enjoy the content.
And we want to thank everyone for tuning in today. For all things pro football, college football, and NFL draft, your one-stop shop is Destination Draft Day. It's a long road to the draft, but we'll get you there. We want to thank MXJ Master for their support in the comment section. Love all the comments that we get from all our fans. And we want to thank LandryFootball.com for the platform. We'll see you guys on Friday where we talk about the top running backs for the upcoming season of college football. Take care. Bye.